The period of dimensions. It is difficult to think of time in the plural. Our thoughts are conditioned to the idea of one time, and though in theory the idea of the plurality of times is already accepted by new physics, in practice we still think of time as one and the same always and everywhere. What therefore would the sixth dimension be? The sixth dimension will be the line of the actualization of other possibilities that were contained in the preceding moment, but were not actualized in time. In every moment and at every point of the three-dimensional world, there are a certain number of possibilities. In time, that is, the fourth dimension, one possibility is actualized every moment, and these actualized possibilities are laid out, one beside the other in the fifth dimension. However, the line of time repeated infinitely in eternity, leaves at every point unactualized possibilities, and it is these possibilities that have not been actualized in one particular time, that are actualized in the sixth dimension, which is an aggregate of all times. The lines of the fifth dimension that go perpendicular to the line of time, form as it were a surface, or fabric of time. The lines of the sixth dimension that start from every point of time in all possible directions, form the solid, a body of time, or three-dimensional continuum of time, of which we know only one dimension. We are one-dimensional beings in relation to time. Because of this we do not see parallel time or parallel times, and for the same reason we do not see the angles and turns of time, but see time instead as a straight line, and perceive these angles and curves instead as movement in time. Until now we have taken all the lines of the fourth, the fifth and the sixth dimensions as straight lines, as coordinates. However, we must remember that these straight lines cannot be regarded as really existing. They are simply an imaginary system of coordinates for determining the spiral. Generally speaking, it is impossible to establish and prove the real existence of straight lines beyond a certain definite scale, and outside certain definite conditions. Yet even these conditional straight lines cease to be straight lines if we imagine them on a revolving body that possesses, aside from them, a whole series of other movements. This is clear with regard to space lines, because straight lines are nothing but imaginary coordinates that serve to measure the length, the breadth, and the depth of spirals. Timelines are geometrically no different from space lines. The only difference between them lies in the fact that in space, we know three dimensions and are able to establish the spiral character of all cosmic movements, namely movements that we take on a sufficiently large scale. However, we dare not do this with regard to time. We try to lay out the whole space of time on one line, or the great time, which is general for everybody and everything. But this is an illusion, as general time does not exist, and each separately existing body, each separately existing system, or what is accepted as such, has its own time. This is recognized by new physics, but what it means and what a separate existence means, is not explained by new physics. Separate time is always a completed circle. We can think of time as a straight line only on the great straight line of the great time. If the great time does not exist, then every separate time can only be a circle, that is a closed curve. However, a circle or any closed curve requires two coordinates for its definition because the circle, or circumference, is a two-dimensional figure. So if the second dimension of time is eternity, then this means that eternity enters into every circle of time, and into every moment of the circle of time. Eternity is the curvature of time. Eternity is also movement, an eternal movement, so that if we then imagine time as a circle, or as any other closed curve, then eternity will signify eternal movement along this curve, eternal repetition, or eternal recurrence. The fifth dimension is movement in the circle, repetition, or recurrence. The sixth dimension is the way out of the circle. If we imagine that one end of the curve rises from the surface, then we visualize the third dimension of time, the sixth dimension of space. The line of time then becomes a spiral. However, the spiral illustrated is only a feeble approximation to the spiral of time, and only its possible geometric representation. The actual spiral of time is not analogous to any of the lines that we know, for it branches off at every point. As there can be many possibilities in every moment, so too can there be many branches at every point. Our mind refuses not only to visualize this, but even to think of the resulting figure in curved lines, and we would lose the direction of our thought in this impasse, if straight lines did not come to our aid. In this regard, we can understand the meaning and purpose of the straight lines of the system of coordinates. Straight lines are not a native of Euclid, as non-Euclidean geometry and the new physics connected with it are trying to make out. Straight lines are a concession to the weakness of our thinking apparatus, a concession thanks to which we are able to think of reality in approximate forms. A figure of three-dimensional time will appear to us in the form of a complicated structure consisting of radii, diverging from every moment of time, each of them bearing within it its own time, and throwing out new radii at every given point. Taken together, these radii will form the three-dimensional continuum of time. We live, we think and exist on one of the lines of time, according to our choices of that particular time cycle. However, the second and third dimensions of time, that is the surface on which this line lies, and the solid in which this surface is included, also enter every moment into our life, and into our consciousness, influencing our time. When we begin to feel the three dimensions of time, we call them direction, duration, and velocity. However, if we wish to understand the true interrelation of things even approximately, then we need to bear in mind the fact that direction, duration, and velocity are not real dimensions. They are merely the reflections of the real dimensions in our consciousness. In thinking of the time body formed by the lines of all the possibilities included in each moment, we must remember that beyond these, there can be nothing. This is the point at which we can understand the limitedness of the infinite universe. The three dimensions of space, plus the zero dimension, plus the three dimensions of time, form the period of dimensions. It is necessary to understand the properties of this period. It includes both space and time. The period of dimensions may be taken as space-time, that is, as the space of 6 dimensions, or the space of the actualization of all possibilities. Outside of this space we can think only of repetitions of the period of dimensions, either on the scale of 0, or on the scale of infinity. However, these are different spaces that have nothing in common with the space of 6 dimensions, and may or may not exist, without changing anything in the space of 6 dimensions. The counting of dimensions in geometry begins with the line, the first dimension, and in a certain sense this is correct. However, both space and time have yet another, the zero dimension, the point, or the moment. It must be understood that any space solid, up to the infinite sphere of old physics, is a point or a moment, when taken in time. The zero dimension, the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth and the sixth dimensions form the period of dimensions. But a figure of the zero dimension, a point, is a solid of another scale. A figure of the first dimension, a line, is infinity in relation to a point. For itself a line is a solid, but a solid of another scale than a point. For a surface, that is, for a figure of 2 dimensions, a line is a point. A surface is 3-dimensional for itself, whereas for a solid it becomes a point and so on. A line and a surface are for us only geometrical concepts, and it is incomprehensible at first glance how they can be 3-dimensional bodies for themselves. However, it becomes more comprehensible if we begin with the solid which represents a really existent body. We know that a body is 3-dimensional for itself, as well as for other 3-dimensional bodies of a scale near to its own. It is also infinity for a surface, which is 0 in relation to it, because no number of surfaces will make a solid. The solid is also a point, a 0, a figure of the 0 dimension, for the 4th dimension. First, because however big it may be, a solid is a point, that is, a moment for time, then secondly, because no number of solids will make time. The whole of 3-dimensional space is but a moment in time. It should be understood that lines and surfaces are only names that we give to dimensions, which for us lie between the point and the solid. They have no real existence for us. Our universe consists only of points and of solids. A point is 0 dimension and a solid is 3 dimensions. On another scale a solid must be taken as a time point, and on yet another scale again as a solid, but as a solid of 3 dimensions of time. In such a simplified universe there would be no time and no motion. Time and motion are created precisely by these incompletely perceived solids, that is, by space and timelines, and by space and time surfaces. The period of dimensions of the real universe therefore consists of 7 powers of solids. A power is of course only a name in this case. A point, the hidden solid. A line, the solid of the 2nd power. A surface, the solid of the 3rd power. A body or a solid, the solid of the 4th power. Time, or the existence of a body or a solid in time, the solid of the 5th power. Eternity, or the existence of time, the solid of the 6th power. The Star of David, the 6-point star, or the existence of eternity, the solid of the 7th power. Furthermore, it should be noted that dimensions are movable, i.e. any 3 consecutive dimensions form either time or space, and the period can move upwards and downwards when 1 degree is added above and 1 is taken away from below. Or when 1 degree is added below and 1 degree is taken away from above. Thus if 1 dimension from below is added to the 6 dimensions we possess, then 1 dimension from above must disappear. The difficulty of understanding this eternally changing universe that contracts and expands according to the size of the observer and the speed of his perception, is counterbalanced by the constancy of laws and relative positions in these changing conditions. The 7th dimension is impossible, for it would be a line leading nowhere, running in a non-existent direction. The line of impossibilities is the line of the 7th, the 8th, and the other non-existent dimensions, i.e. a line that leads nowhere and comes from nowhere. No matter what strange universe we may imagine, we can never admit the existence of a solar system in which the moon is made of green cheese. In the same way, whatever strange scientific manipulations we may think of, we cannot imagine that Professor Einstein would really erect a pole in the middle of the Potsdamer Platz in order to measure the distance between the Earth and the clouds, as he threatens to do in his book. One could find many such examples. The whole of our life actually consists of phenomena of the 7th dimension, that is, of phenomena of fictitious possibility, fictitious importance, and of fictitious value. We live in the 7th dimension, outside of reality, and cannot escape from it. Our model of the universe can never be complete if we do not realize the place occupied by the 7th dimension, however it is very difficult to realize this. We never even come close to understanding how many non-existent things play a role in our lives, govern our fate and our actions. However, we must not forget that even the non-existent and impossible can vary by degrees, and it is therefore justifiable to talk not of the 7th dimension, but generally of imaginary dimensions, the number of which is also imaginary.